Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Stewards of Success podcast. My name is Jeff Breeze, and as always with me to my side is my co-host Brent Mikosh. Brent, how are we doing this morning?
Fantastic. I'm looking very forward to today's conversation. It's an important one.
Yeah, it's the holidays, and we are excited to not only have some time in the studio, but with somebody around the holiday theme of giving and charity, and have a titan in the charity world here in Phoenix with us, Mr. Steve Zabilski of the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust. Steve, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'm honored and delighted to be with the two of you this morning.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great get for us. Steve is a busy guy, a very humble guy, and so we'll do our best to keep our comments to the build in the organization, because Steve in his humility refuses to let us talk about him, and I promise to honor that for you.
It would be a short show if you wanted to talk about me, and I'm not sure you'd have any viewers at the end.
Well, I think from what I know and researched and talking to people and just your reputation, that humility has led you to places that I can't wait to explore. But to start out, we like to ask all of our guests if they can take us back, and in your case in particular, what's the beginning and the entry point of your you getting started in nonprofit work?
Well, that's a great question. I was an accountant. I graduated from California State University, Northridge in 1980. I went to work for a CPA firm. I was there for 6 years. I went to work for one of my clients for 11 years. And I had moved around the country several times with the company I was with. And my wife and I had moved to Phoenix. We had 3 children. And the company was going to move me again. And we had just bought a home here. We really liked Phoenix. You know, our kids were getting older now where moving wasn't a good thing. We had moved like 4 times in 5 years. And I couldn't keep a job. And so...
Fortunately, that changed, I think.
And I saw an ad in the paper that St. Vincent de Paul was looking for an executive director, and they wanted somebody with a business background, that knew accounting, that knew budgeting, that knew strategic planning, that had some management experience. I had all of those things. What I didn't have was the nonprofit experience that they wanted. But I was saying to myself, I really want to find another job here in Phoenix because we didn't want to move. I sent them a resume, and I kid you not, I think I must have been the only person that saw that ad, because they ended up hiring me, and I was like, yeah, but I don't even know what to do, and I don't know anything about nonprofit. They said, oh, you'll figure it out. And that was almost 30 years ago.
So 2 questions. The first one is, do you remember where they were trying to move you to? For the 4th time or 5th time?
I do. It was to Texas.
Okay.
And I really liked Texas, and I had previously lived in, that was one of my stops.
Yeah.
I had lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania, then they moved me to Chicago, then they moved me to Dallas, then they moved me to Phoenix. They were going to move me back to Texas, but we had just bought a house here. Yeah. And our children were old enough now where they were developing. We just didn't want to move. It didn't matter where they were going to send. We just didn't want to move. And so I said to my wife, I think I'm going to see if I can't find another job somewhere. And I was fortuitous and blessed, and God just opened the door, and that was one of the great blessings in my life.
Well, too bad for Texas and good for Phoenix.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. Certainly good for Zabilski.
Sure. And then my second question is, you didn't have nonprofit experience, but what in your mind was the key to you obtaining, acquiring, collaborating? Like, nobody steps into a role knowing all of the job. Right. So were you frightened? Were you excited? All of it? Like, what was the thought process of stepping into a role when they hired you and having no nonprofit experience?
Frightened and excited. Yeah. You're exactly right. Those are 2 great words. I remember during the interview process, they asked me a number of very specific technical questions. How would you handle this type of situation? And my answer to every one of them was, gee, I really don't know. I mean, I don't know the best way to deal with people who are struggling with alcoholism, who are older adults who are home. I don't know that. And so I must have said, gee, I'm really not sure about 10 times. And I thought at the end, I'm never going to get the job because I didn't know the answer to any question. But when they hired me afterwards, I remember I spoke with the members of the board and said, I'm a little surprised. And they said, oh, you can learn all that stuff. We wanted someone that was honest and wasn't trying to trick us or pretend they knew everything. Well, when you know nothing and you know that you know nothing, it's somewhat of it takes some of the pressure off because you're not afraid to ask questions. You're not afraid to listen. You're not afraid to have to people tell you the best ways to do things. And fortunately, I had a great board of directors and a great staff.
And so it's interesting because this has come up in multiple episodes, this idea of the authenticity to be who you are when you step into these places. And I guess my question is, had that, raw kind of candor and honesty about that been a hallmark of your career to that point? Was that who you are? What did it feel vulnerable or like at that moment you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said I don't know. I should have pretended I knew at least one of those 10 things.
Right. No, so I think looking back at my business, my professional career, I think the one thing that I have in common with each new job that I started, and frankly, this goes back even to high school when I started working in the nursery department, and then when I started working for a CPA firm, and then when I started working for insurance, I remember on the first day going, gosh, I have no idea what to do. I have no idea what to do. I mean, it's not like I walked in and go, okay, I have this great game plan, and we're going to execute this plan, and we're going to get this done in 90 days. I didn't know what to do, and I felt almost the imposter syndrome and underqualified and boy, this is going to be my undoing. But I think if you're willing to be a little bit vulnerable, to listen, to learn, to be patient, to think about things, it can come together. And again, I've been so blessed that it has.
I also think there's something very liberating about that, because when you come in and you don't have a preconceived idea of how you're going to solve a problem, it opens your mind to possibilities that you would not have had you come in with all the answers.
Brent, you are so correct in that. The pressure is significantly reduced, that you have to fix this and you got to fix it right away.
Right.
And not at all. And I think the other thing that's been a blessing is every organization that I've joined, they've been doing just fine. It isn't like, oh my God, we're going to be out of business next week. We've got to fundamentally transform everything. We've got to do it today. They've been fine. And my wife pointed out to me once or twice if I would complain about something at St. Vincent de Paul that I was frustrated about, she'd say to me, Steve, the most amazing thing is, how did St. Vincent de Paul ever survive those 50 years without you? So I go, that's pretty humbling when your wife says it. Because when I joined it, they were just celebrating their 50-year anniversary. Yeah. And it really was a fine organization doing fine work. And so
that is precisely where I wanted to go next. Can you give us, what was the year when you joined?
1996.
1996. So take us back if you can. What's the state of St. Vincent de Paul in 1996? How big is it? What is it doing? What did you step into that at that point, as you said, was successful?
Yeah, it was a wonderful organization. They had a number of areas where they helped people. They were best known for their conferences of charities, their food banks, and they had about 70 of them throughout the state of Arizona. And these were where volunteers would work all throughout the state, central and northern Arizona, and they would deliver food to people, help them with their rents, help them with their utilities. They also had a small homeless shelter, a small medical clinic, and we had a number of thrift stores. And so we were a diversified business. We had several hundred employees. Our budget was probably close to $10 million. And the great blessing that we had, the great asset that we had, was thousands of volunteers.
Oh, yeah.
Thousands of volunteers, people that would give you their time, treasure, and talents, asking nothing in return. And that to me was what made it so special, from the board of directors to the people that would come in and work in our kitchen every day and help us prepare the meals, serve the meals in the dining room, work in our thrift stores, the doctors who would work in our medical clinic. And so it was just a great place to be.
You know, I think there's a topic to go back to there that I think is interesting, and it's this topic of vulnerability and not knowing anything. And I think it's funny because a lot of times in business, and particularly social media today, you see young people, having success. And, then you see older generations sort of, these kids. And what I think is so interesting is that when you're young, you are sort of naive. I don't want to say dumb, but you don't know any better. And I remember reading a book from Al Michaels, the broadcaster. Mm. And he was talking about the day that, he's older now, and he's been, 1980s doing the U.S. Olympic hockey in the Olympics when they won the gold medal. And he's telling all these stories, and somebody told him early on, or said to him, when is it time for you to stop doing this? And he said, the day I walk in jaded. Mm. And I think as we create success, sometimes it clouds the idea that this youthful energy, and I think it's amazing. I think it's something we don't give enough young entrepreneurs, leaders credit for, is that idea of not knowing anything stimulates some really amazing things. Ask like Mark Zuckerberg, what that can do. Back to the beginnings of what you did at St. Vincent de Paul. What were some of the key initiatives early on that were part of your journey that either you amplified or were new that were brought in? And where did those come from, those ideas, and how you thought about them?
Well, several things come to mind. Initially, one of the things that my team and I were able to do was really to reach out to the business community here in Phoenix and Maricopa County, and people like Jerry Colangelo and Marty Schultz and Bill Post and Steve Wheeler and many other businessmen and women who ran organizations but had great hearts and wanted to help and wanted to partner. And we tried to provide that bridge to these individuals, to these organizations, where they can come to St. Vincent de Paul, their organization can come, they can come, and they can volunteer their time, they can support a food drive, whatever it is that they would like to do. And we really were able to increase that over the years, and partnering with the Phoenix Community Alliance, the business community, the Diamondbacks were just terrific partners, and so that was one of the things. The second thing, I think, is the building of the Human Services Campus in downtown Phoenix. Yeah. That was a collaboration of many nonprofit organizations, the public sector, Maricopa County, the city of Phoenix, the CAS organization, St. Joseph the Worker, and again, the business community, the Phoenix Community Alliance, and we were all able to come together. And it took a couple of years, but it still exists. The Human Services Campus just celebrated its 20-year anniversary just 2 weeks ago. And it's a role model for the country. People from around the country come to look at the Human Services Campus.
Now, let me ask you this, because you talk about, you've got nonprofit world, certain set of goals. You've got government, definitely a certain set of goals. Business community, certain set of goals. How difficult was it to get those three parties in alignment?
In some respects, you can see there are definitely challenges. But I think the commonality at the end of the day is, when you're working with people that want to serve, they want to serve, they want to be of service. Whether you're a government official, whether you're a business leader, whether you work in the nonprofit community, you want to be of service. And so you look for that alignment. Where can we create those opportunities where people can come and find meaning and joy and purpose in their life? And you find that at the CEO level, and you find that at the entry level, and everything in between. And so we worked real hard on trying to listen. What is it that we can do that will allow these organizations to want to partner with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you hear a lot these days, and I don't remember it earlier in my career, about servant leadership. And where I break that down, and we see it all the time in our work with people, with money in particular, and people who have had success in their businesses. I don't care if you're the entry level, to your point, or the CEO. There is a shared humanity we all have. And if you can tease that out at all levels, I mean, you can amplify through companies, through organizations, and the partnership is, I think, really interesting. I'm curious, as a career professional with an accounting background, what role and significance, like what portion of your time maybe did you think was going to be working on accounting and numbers and running the business? What did it end up being? Was that different? Like, where did you end up spending your time, and was that different than what you thought going into it?
It was. So that's a great question. So early on, I think most of us, I certainly do, we tend to gravitate to the things that we're most comfortable with. I can't ice skate, so you're not going to find me playing hockey, but I can play baseball, so I go out and play baseball. But in the business world, so I was very comfortable with the financials, with doing the budget, with those types of financial measurements and so forth. And over the years, we were able to improve that and so forth. But I'll never forget, in one of our meetings, the board meetings, and they were doing my annual review, and a couple of the board members said to me, Steve, you're doing a really fine job over in these areas, but you're not the chief financial officer, and you're not even the chief operating officer. You're the executive director. You need to act like an executive director. And what they were saying was, I need to spend more time out in the community with our donors, telling our story. Now, I'm a financial guy. I'm very happy with the spreadsheet and Excel spreadsheet. That's sort of what I wanted to do. But I realized they were right. So I had to change my focus and spend more time doing things that I was less comfortable with. I don't like giving speeches, and I get uncomfortable walking into a room with 100 people and I don't know anybody. But that was my job.
Did you acquire those skills just by doing it repeatedly? Did you go seek out skill sets to be able to do that better? Because I've seen you in rooms, and if you're uncomfortable in front of rooms, I don't see it. So something from the thought process to the execution has really been amplified, and you do it really well. So what happened? Was it repetition?
Yes and yes and yes. I mean, I certainly sought out people who were very good at that, mentors and seeking help. And then you're right, after a while, you just have to make up your mind. I remember thinking, this is my job. If this is what I want to continue, I'm going to have to learn to do this and do it better. And to this day, I walk into a room, and if I don't know anybody, I get a little bit uncomfortable, and that's just who I am. But I learned that's part of my job. I've got to overcome it. And so I struggle with it, but I recognize that it's important.
Yeah, somebody once told me, what's the best thing that Olympic and elite level athletes do? They work on their weaknesses. They don't work on their strengths, right? And we tend to want to work on our strengths. And so I think that's a great way to explain that evolution. It's a combination of both.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well, because very similar. Early on in my career, I was very uncomfortable walking into a room where I didn't know people, or sitting down having a conversation with somebody I didn't know, and it took work.
Yeah. There's a reason I went into accounting and not marketing or not sales. I'm very happy being alone at my desk and looking at numbers and adding them up and doing the spreadsheet and preparing the finance. I'm very happy doing that, and I'm pretty good at it. Yeah. This other stuff, oh my God, that's hard work.
Yeah. I'm curious, what was the difference, or what is the difference from your experience in leadership and roles you had in the for-profit world versus the nonprofit world? Is there significance there?
There is and there isn't. And I think, first of all, what I very quickly realized was, in the nonprofit world, I got to pay the light bill, I got to pay the utility bill, I have payroll, we have to buy our merchandise, we have to know what we have in inventory, I have to have more revenues than I do expenses, and I have to project out. So in that sense, it's very, very similar. I mean, it's a business. Yeah. It is a business, and if you run out of money, you're in trouble. And bad things happen. And so from that standpoint, it's identical. Now, we do have, in addition to the bottom line of making sure our revenues exceed our expenses, we have this additional goal of how are we serving the public. We don't have shareholders whom we report to, but we do have the community, the public, to whom we owe the responsibility of housing people, feeding people, providing health care, and so forth. And so there's some very intangibles on that. There's certainly tangibles. I mean, I get asked all the time, how many meals are you serving? How many homeless people are you helping? But there's that intangible benefit that comes with it too.
To that point, was there ever a moment in time, or maybe an extended one, where things hung in the balance and you weren't, there's an ebb and flow to for-profit businesses. I'm sure there's an ebb and flow to nonprofit businesses. What was some of, maybe a period of time where it wasn't quite so easy to be Steve Zabilski at St. Vincent de Paul?
I remember our chief financial officer walking into my office one day and saying, "Steve, I have a question for you." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Do you want to pay the employees this week, or do you want to pay the rent and the utilities?" And I said, "Well, I want to pay both." He goes, "No, that's not the question."
Sorry,
So I go like, "Oh boy, this is, and so we had to really, we paid a couple of bills maybe a week or two late, and a couple of the people on the management team didn't get their check that day. And
was that a moment where you were wishing to be in a room full of 100 people you didn't know instead of answering that question?
When I was wondering, I'm not sure they hired the right person. So I'm quite sure they didn't hire the right person. And so, no, we have those struggles, and particularly early on. But even then as you grow the revenues, then you grow the business. There's always that pressure. It's not like when donors give us money at St. Vincent de Paul, we put it to use. We don't just sit here and say, "Oh, well, we're just going to put that in the bank and put it in the bank, and we got a 10-year reserve." No, we put it to use. So we're a much bigger organization today than we were. But many of those pressures are still the same. We don't worry about making payroll this week. But we think about making it in 2 or 3 months, so.
Let's go back to the campus, because I think this is a key point. If you've never seen it, if you aren't a Phoenician and you don't know the work that's done here, Brent and I were able to go on a bus tour and a day-long trip going through all of the journey of St. Vincent de Paul and what you all what St. Vincent de Paul does there. And I'm blown away because for 10 plus years I've been going on campus, and I'm blown away every time I go there. There's something else going up. There's another initiative. Can you give the scope maybe in some quantitative, like how big is the campus? What type of, how many meals are we serving a day? What goes on a daily basis today so people can get an idea of the scope of what St. Vincent de Paul is doing here in Phoenix?
On average, 1,000 people a day will visit the Human Services campus. More than half of them live there. Two-thirds of them will live there. St. Vincent de Paul will provide more than 1,000 meals a day to people who are coming for food. They have job services, all types of counseling. Circle the City provides health care there. Almost any type of service that someone who is homeless, we provide there at the Human Services campus. And it just continues to grow and grow and grow under the great leadership of Amy Schwabenlender, who's the CEO, the director of the HSC, her fabulous team, the people at CAST, the people at St. Vincent de Paul. And I can't imagine what this city would be like today had there not been the leadership 20 years ago of the business community, the government community, David Smith at Maricopa County and so many others, and said, this is the right thing to do. I remember Marty Schultz and Steve Wheeler saying, we judge a community on how it treats those least fortunate.
Yeah.
And they live that. They live that. They just don't talk that. They live that in their daily lives, and that has continued to this day.
I want to expand on that a little bit. I'm curious how this job, coming from an accounting background where everything's very black and white, now doing this work that you're doing, how did that journey change you spiritually, personally? How did it change the essence of who you were?
Well, it's had a pretty significant impact. First and foremost, when I wake up every morning, and I mean every morning, my first thoughts are, thank you, God, for this great blessing of my life, of my family, and what I get to do. To be part of this tremendous team at St. Vincent de Paul and now at the Virginia Piper Charitable Trust. And while I loved my job in accounting and I loved my job at the insurance company, I never quite had that same, that same feeling. This is people who work in these industries, the nonprofits and so forth, particularly when you're in human services or healthcare or education, you really feel it's a calling. It's a ministry. It is a ministry. Yeah. This isn't just a job. I mean, I have to pay the bills, so I have to have some paycheck. But it's why God created us. Yeah. And we get the opportunity to live that life to the fullest and be of service to humanity, to other people. And the joy and the blessing that comes with that is just, I've said before I would do it for free if I could, and hopefully someday I will do it for free. I don't work at St. Vincent de Paul anymore, but I volunteer there. I'm on their board, and I want it to be a part of my life until the day I die.
Was there a moment or a person or a company or an employee that the light switch went off in the way that you just said that you can think of, where it was like, they were coming in because they were told to, or, I'm on this committee, or, my boss. And do you get to see, and does anything come to mind of somebody where the light switch went off and it went from something I'm doing to something I am or have become?
Without a doubt. And what I've witnessed, what I've said many times, and this isn't a direct answer to your question, but it goes to I think the point of it is, we say, when people come to St. Vincent de Paul to volunteer, whether you're volunteering in the kitchen, the dining room, a thrift store, the home, anywhere, when you leave, you're a different person. You are the same person that the person that came in the door is not the same person who comes out of the door. And that can be profound. Yeah. It can be a profound experience. And whether you're young and in high school or college or even younger than that, or you're an older adult in your 70s and 80s, you experience that joy, that sense of purpose and meaning. And to me, that is the beauty of St. Vincent de Paul. Of course, the meals are important. Of course, that's why we do it. Of course, the homeless, that's why we do it. Of course, the healthcare is important. That's why we do it. But I've said many, many times, if Bill Gates were to all of a sudden say, working with volunteers is hard because you have to train them, and sometimes they don't show up, and they want to do this or that. well, I'll just give you $1 billion, and you can go hire people. And then you don't have to worry about money. We would say no.
Yeah.
Now, when I say that, Ryan Corey and Shannon Clancy get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, we'll take it. We'll take the money. We'll use it for something else. But my point is that, yes, I'm asked all the time, how many meals, how many of this, but the other really important measurement, and it's the second half of our mission statement, is we're here to give people the opportunity to serve.
Steve, was there an example, not just obviously the people that are volunteering for you, but someone that St. Vincent de Paul helped? And it's tens of thousands, if not more than that. But is there one situation or one case that really has stuck with you and stands out in your mind?
There's so many. I will never forget early in my career, early in my first year there, I was working late at night. It's probably 9 o'clock at night. And there was a knock. I work in the administration building, and there was a knock on the door. And I pretty much, we were closed. We closed at 6 o'clock or whatever. I was working on the budget, if you can believe that. The accountant working on the budget. It was due.
I'll
late
stay after and do this.
Right,
I got it.
I was happy. And there was a knock on the door around the corner. There was a knock on the door, and my first reaction was, well, it's somebody who wants something, but we're closed. We're closed. Everything's closed up. And there's nothing I can do, and so I ignored it. Well, then there was a knock the second time, and I thought, well, I'm going to get up and go tell the person, I'm sorry, we're closed, and can you come back tomorrow, and we'll be able to help you tomorrow. We open at 7 a.m. I opened the door, and there was a woman there, and instantly I could tell she was panicked, just panicked. And I said, can I help you? And she said, I'm homeless. I'm living in, they had rented a U-Haul truck. And she and two little children, like a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, were living in that truck. And all of a sudden, it changed everything for me. It changed. The budget was no longer important. The budget didn't matter. The reason I stayed late was irrelevant. And I just remember going, I don't know what to do. We're close. So I took them to the local motel, put them in the hotel for the night, said, I will pick you up tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. I will bring you down here to St. Vincent, and we will get you the help from the professionals. This was in 1997. The woman has since passed away, but I still know the two children today. To this day. And I've seen them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. Neither of them live in Arizona. The two children, they're grown, obviously, but I still stay in contact with them, talk to them on Thanksgiving Day. And just my last comment is, people will look at that and say, isn't that wonderful what St. Vincent de Paul did for them? Okay, that's fair. Sure. They did equally as much for us, just by being who they are.
But what I hear in that story, besides things that make the lump in my throat stick out, is you came out with a question. Like you thought you were getting up to go make a statement about being closed, but Steve comes out with a question, which is, how can I help you? Or can I help you? Yeah. And there's a shift, right? It's a totally different mentality. It's you become the servant in that moment. Yes. And 30, however many years later, you're telling that story and making people that will never know those two children feel. And I think that's miraculous. I mean, that's it. When you let's put a pin on it, that's it. So what an amazing story.
They are a blessing to me, to my life. In fact, I consider them part of our family. It's part of my family. They know my children, and the blessing is to me.
And what an inflection point, because things could have gone had you not. I would argue that's why you stayed that night. It wasn't to work on the budget. But
somebody else had you there for a different reason, right?
Yeah.
Brent, I think about that. Yeah. It's so interesting you say that. I think about that all the time. What if I had just instead said, hey, this budget's important? And it was. I mean, and I had to get it done, and the board of directors wanted it, and we were going to pass it in next month. And I could have so easily said, I'm busy and we're closed, and I could have justified it, and how different my life would be today. And then the other thing is, it's the warning to me about, I wonder all the other times when I didn't answer the knock at the door, I didn't, and so you have to be mindful of that.
I'm curious. So 25 years at St. Vincent de Paul in this role, 26.
26, yeah.
what gave you the confidence to transition out of St. Vincent de Paul and feel like it was in as good, if not better, hands?
No, so that again, a great question. So we had a wonderful team of people. I mean, magnificent team of people. The best anywhere. The best. I'm very involved with St. Vincent de Paul's around the country. The St. Vincent de Paul and the Phoenix. We had the finest group of people, led by Shannon Clancy and Ryan Corey and Mary Chow Thompson and many other people. And Shannon was 14. I was in my mid 60s, and Shannon was 14 years younger than me, and it was her turn. It was her turn. It was just her turn. You don't do things forever. I mean, our life is finite. We all have mortality, and she had been the good and faithful servant, and then some, and then some. And it was her turn to run the organization, and our board of directors agreed. And so I stepped aside. I didn't leave St. Vincent. I stepped aside, and I was thrilled to work for Shannon because I think she was the best CEO in the country. I got a chance to her the best CEO in the country, and I get to do some of the things.
You guys should have hired her in '97.
No, they should have. People say that. No, so honestly, people will say, I'll say, gosh, we should have made this change. We did this 3 years ago, and I will say, half jokingly, oh, we probably should have done it 5 years ago. And some of my friends will respond, actually, Steve, we should have done this maybe 10, 12 years ago. I'm like, oh, thanks a lot.
Gosh, that Steve Zabilski really held us back.
No, right. Well, I was a little fearful. You don't ever want to be that person. And so Shannon she was more than ready and more than capable. And so what was interesting is our last couple of years when we were planning the transition, Shannon was the one who would be penning the articles that would be in the Arizona Republic. Shannon was the one who would be speaking at the major events. Right. Anytime I would go meet with any donor, Shannon was right there. So that when St. Vincent de Paul did announce that Steve Zabilski will be stepping aside this coming June and Shannon Clancy will be take over, the reaction from about 99% of the people was, I thought she was already running the place, and so that made it a good transition.
Well, what's incredible about that is so many leaders, whether it's business or anywhere else, it's like they've got their little power base, and they're not going to let anyone else in. The fact, and that it's a massive problem with businesses and succession plans and everything, is no one's been groomed to take over.
I couldn't agree more, Brendan. People will say to me, what are you most proud of? I'm most proud of the team at St. Vincent de Paul today that has taken the organization to new levels, to higher levels. They're doing bigger and better things than they've ever done, and I'm so proud of that. I'm so proud of that.
Yeah. You watch, your kids go off to college, and you watch them flourish.
Exactly.
Right?
Then you've done your job well.
Yeah.
That's right.
Which I don't know yet, but it's coming rapidly in the forefront here for us. So I might need to call you on some of those transition moments in life. Your current role at Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust, can you talk about what it is today that you do, and perhaps what's different, what's similar, and what made you take on that role after so much success, and what were those feelings about doing that?
Right. At first, I was delighted to be working at St. Vincent de Paul, to not be the CEO, but to still be involved in working for Shannon. And she now was the leader, and she was in charge, and I was just a member of the team, and I was thrilled to do that. Well, I had been a member of the Piper Trust board of directors for 15, 16 years. And our CEO, Mary Jane Wren, who was just a terrific, terrific leader, she had some health issues, and she was in her 70s, and just she wanted to retire. And so the trustees came to me and said, they knew I had stepped aside as the CEO at St. Vincent de Paul, and they said, we'd like you to be the CEO of the Piper Trust. And my first reaction was, well, I'm just the convenient choice because you happen to know me, and I know where the copy machine is or the bathroom is, and the transition will be easier. But I'm not the best choice. Yeah. But over the course of several months, they kept saying, we really, really want you to be the CEO. And I thought about it and prayed about it, and I said yes. And part of the reason was because I still was able to stay on the St. Vincent de Paul board of directors. So I was engaged there. I was not the day-to-day, but I still, I got to be involved. I got to be supportive of Shannon's work. And then I had the opportunity to be part of the Piper Trust, which is a magnificent organization, and to help shape our strategy, to work with the trustees in giving away the money to just wonderful organizations. And so I feel like I died and went to heaven. I thought I was in heaven. Now I feel like I definitely am in heaven, getting to do both.
What's different about your job at Piper compared to what you did at St. Vincent de Paul?
So what's different is I don't have to worry about making payroll. You know, we have the resources. We're going to make payroll. So I don't worry about that anymore. And after 25 years of kind of worrying about payroll, it's nice not to have to.
For sure.
But what I found that it gets replaced with is there's a whole lot of organizations out there, and they're worried about payroll, and they're looking to us for help. And so where can we be most helpful? Where can we make the biggest difference with the organizations that are doing the most good here in Maricopa County?
In both places, what would you say the key to leadership has been for you?
I think, again, coming back to early on, is recognizing that both at St. Vincent de Paul and at the Piper Trust and the previous, these organizations were doing just fine long before I got there. They were just fine. They were big successful organizations. And so again, and they didn't, quote, need me. They didn't need anybody. I mean, they were doing just fine. So coming in and having the luxury of time to listen, to learn, to discern, and then having really smart people. Our staff at Piper is tremendous. I mean, we have these are professional people that have been doing this for, a long, long time. Our board of directors is a who's who in the community. And so having the luxury of being around people like that, I feel a little bit like I'm just a person who's air traffic, and I'm directing traffic and so forth. It's not like I come up with all these great ideas, and so not at all. We have people that do that. I can prioritize things and be the face to the community and so forth. But it's our trustees and our tremendous staff at the Piper Trust that make things go every day.
I was hoping in some part of the conversation I could find a way to sneak Steve to take credit for something in his career. And I'm drawing a blank on that one. So that'll tell you a lot about,
so I'll tell you
about the man
what,
in front
ask
of
the
us.
people at St. Vincent de Paul Piper. But give them a heads up, because they're going to have to really think about, well, what did he do that was any good?
Yeah. I suspect maybe someday if there's a roast for Steve, there's a lot of stuff coming out. Are you ready for what we call our lightning round for a couple last questions that
Let's
we
do
just
it.
love to pick your brain on?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's do it.
What are you most proud of?
My family. My wonderful wife, my 3 children they're fine people. They're just fine people. And then I'm just so pleased to have been a part of 2 just outstanding organizations, and then I didn't screw them up.
Made them better, actually.
It's in many respects. When you take, do you want to be the coach that comes in and takes over the team that just won the Super Bowl, or do you want to be a coach that comes in? We got some work to do here. So you have to be a little careful on that. And I inherited Super Bowl winning teams, and so I'm proud that I didn't take any of them into the ground.
Fantastic answer. What's your definition of success?
I think peace in life, understanding who you are, why God created you, and then having the ability to work towards that throughout your life.
Yeah. What a cool answer. What would you like your legacy to be, Steve?
He was a good team player. He was a good member of the team. He was on the team, and he contributed to the team, and he added something to the team. And when people say that they enjoyed working at St. Vincent de Paul and accomplishing the things we accomplished, same thing at the Piper Trust. You feel real good about that, knowing that there are people in the community, the people that have been served, the organizations that have received grants, the people who have volunteered, that their life is just a little bit better, maybe a little bit more meaning because of what these organizations have done.
What advice do you wish you had way back when that nobody gave you?
That's a really good question. I probably need to be more patient. like I said, my wife sometimes would say to me, "Gosh, Steve, I just don't understand how St. Vincent de Paul ever survived 50 years without you being there."
Leave it to our wives to somehow point out
and that really, I mean, that was just like
Here's your humble soup.
No, it was. I mean, you talk about being effective, and she would say it seriously. I mean, she wasn't laughing. She said it really serious. I was like, okay, all right. But no, I probably. I need to learn to be just a little bit more patient and understanding, and that there's all of us have great struggles, and we don't always know what they are. We rarely know what other people's struggles are, and just to understand that just because something might be great for me today, that doesn't mean it's great for you or you or you or you or you, and so forth. So, yeah.
What's your favorite quote, if any?
One of my favorite quotes that I've thought about my whole life just is, "When much is given, much will be required." And I think about that, and I've been so blessed, and I hope I have, with the gifts that I've been given, I hope that I've given some of that back to others and to the community. And I think at the end of the day, that's what God judges us on, not just results, but really our effort.
Yeah. You get a do-over on anything, what would it be?
I think I would have spent, I'm always in a hurry. I'm trying to do 10 things. I scheduled 10 hours into an 8-hour day or 12 hours into an 8-hour day, which means I'm always in a hurry. And we talked before this even about I got to go from here to another. And I think I wish that I had maybe not tried to do quite as much, but spent more time in the moment with the people who I'm at. Just saying, I'm walking through the kitchen to get to the homeless shelter, but I could have just stopped for a second and said to the cooks and the chefs and people, "Thanks for what you're doing." And if I would do that, it was always like I would wave while I was walking. I didn't want to break stride. And if I had the chance again, I would take a little bit more time with the person I was with at the moment, and just say, "Thank you, bless you for what you're doing," and not to all. I'm in such a hurry always. I gotta figure that one out.
I think that is a great lightning round question to end on. Brent, do you have any closing thoughts for us before we let Steve off to his next engagement?
Yeah, I just think that you mentioned before, I'm paraphrasing, but a colleague of yours has said that society can be judged by how you treat the weakest among you, and we don't always realize how thin that safety net can be, and we need to be thankful every day that it's not us on the other side of that looking glass. And so the work that you've done over the years in this community is fabulous. So thank you for this time today.
Well, thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Steve, thank you. Brent, thanks for joining me as always. And our parting gift to our guests, it's our new tradition. Our sponsor is the Wealth Stewards, which is actually our company that Brent and I own. So they're very gracious. So we're now giving all of our guests a parting gift, which is your own Wealth Stewards hat to keep you out of the Phoenix sun, but to say, most importantly, thank you for the journey. Thank you for all the work you've done for this community. But most importantly and acutely, thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you. I'm honored to be here. And thank you for what you do for the community, what you do. It's people like you who make St. Vincent de Paul and so many other organizations the great places there. So bless you.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thanks once again for joining us for Stewards of Success in our podcast. If you're seeing us on YouTube, we're glad that you've endured, and maybe perhaps you saw some of the lighting issues with the beautiful sunshine we have outside here in Phoenix. So thanks for putting on your sunglasses and finishing off our time together. This is the Stewards of Success podcast. Please join us for our next episode, and thanks so much for listening.